Welcome to A Double
Double
and Dice
with your host Kim
and Jocelyn.
Pour your favorite beverage.
Pull up a comfy chair,
As we are ready to roll.
Welcome to episode 7 of A Double and Dice, and today we have another special guest with us that's going to be helping us talk about the meta that's going on right now since the rotation happened May 1st. We'll talk some win conditions, some control cards out there, and a special project that he's continuously been working on. And who is our special guest today, Jocelyn?
So we'd like to introduce Laurier, also known as CCM 00007. I think I got the 4 zeros in there. So welcome, Laurier. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So first off, before we get into any of that, I want to ask you about your screen name, CCM 7, and the fact that you're on this episode, episode 7, and your screen name ends in 7 was completely coincidental, but I'm glad that it happened. So does the CCM have anything to do with the hockey equipment manufacturer?
You'd think so, seeing as we're all Canadian here, but no, actually.
Okay.
Short backstory on that. I actually used to go by a different nickname, which was Chronocross Maniac. At that point, I was involved in fan fiction. That was fun. Then I eventually got to work on a website, which I will not name here because I don't want people to be approached about this. And things did not end great. So, unfortunately, frictions happen, people happen. When there's hard work, sometimes personal relations don't always end the best of ways. And so, the next time I decided to be active online, I just decided to switch to a username that would remind me of that, but not be that one that people could find me with if they looked for me. Because of one particular individual I was afraid might try to.
Okay.
So, hence why I put CCM, standing again for Chronocross Maniac, and then added a bunch of digits at the end.
And did the digits mean anything?
No.
Just what you thought about that time.
It's just whatever I thought of at that time. And it just stuck. And from there, I continued to use that in other settings, and
now you are CCM 7.
7, yes.
There you go.
I think I always miss a 0 in there. I think it's like
4
5.
zeros.
Yeah, I think it's always 5.
No,
Cool, I didn't know
zeros.
that. That's a good one.
Well, thank you. That's very interesting. I was sure that it had something to do with the company that makes the hockey equipment, CCM, because that's so big here in Canada. And you see it on all of the hockey helmets, and we all grow up here, and hockey is like a way of life, and I thought it might have to do with that. So
Yeah, with me being a big Habs fan, I wish I would have thought of that, but I didn't. I just have to be honest here.
well, we can retcon it. All right, Chronocross Maniac. So let's move on. So we wanted to talk to you today, first off, about your pet project on dm-north.com, which I think predated the website. I think maybe it started on the reserve pool.
Oh,
No.
No. You're talking about the essentials list.
Yes.
That actually started on Facebook.
Okay.
Okay, some background on that. If you go in Dice Masters Unlimited on Facebook, and you look at under files, you will see, if you scroll down far enough, Dice Masters DM Staples.
Okay.
That's what that was originally. I started it back in 2017, and it's because at that point there were already so many sets out there, and people were going, "Oh, I want to get in Dice Masters. I like this set. What cards are good?" And I saw that question so many times that after a while, I was like, why don't we have just a list of suggestions for people when they start playing, so that they can at least have a starting point to know, oh, here are cards I need to look for. So that started way back in 2017 on Facebook. And I just put that document there, and it was appreciated at the time. So I kept updating it until after the Mighty Thor came out, and then we started DM North, and I always meant to transfer the list over to that website, but then figuring out the technical aspects of it and just being busy, as I'm sure you'll understand, because by that point I had 4 kids. It just ended up being put on the shelf for, in my opinion, a bit too long. But now it's back, and it's looking certainly a lot fancier than it did when it was just a little Word document.
Well, certainly files on Facebook are kind of a challenge, right? They're hard to find sometimes, and it's good that it has a permanent place now on dm-north.com. Could you tell us a little bit about how a card gets on the essential list?
Okay, that is... Okay, first of all, I will acknowledge right off the bat, it's subjective. I'm not somehow a giant Dice Masters guru who knows best than everyone else. Hence why at the very beginning of the page, if you go on the essentials list, I mention it. The following is just our opinion, and that should be taken with a grain of salt or two. In fact, originally I wanted to say, or the whole shaker while you're at it. But it gets there when I have looked at the way the meta is evolving, or I've looked at the way the cards are played. Is this the best option for that strategy? And is that strategy viable? Maybe not at the top meta level necessarily, but at least at a semi-competitive level. Is this something you could seriously consider running while not... Is this something you could seriously consider running in an event? Again, doesn't have to be the top meta option, otherwise it would be very short and very boring, but is it something you can seriously consider at least at a semi-competitive level? And then I look again to see if it's the best option for the job.
Yeah, so I think that in 2017 when you started it too, all of the sets at that time were collectible, so I could see why it was important to try and figure that out, because you're pulling from blind packs, right?
That was generally true, but there were already a few one-time purchases. The TMNT boxes, the Doctor Strange team pack came out around that. Came out even before then, yeah. So we already had some one-time purchase sets, and people were like, "Is it worth getting? What would I get out of it?" But for the most part, yes, sets were collectible. So knowing which rares or super rares to hunt was very appreciated. I know I was actually kind of careful when a set would just come out because I didn't want to influence the prices of the cards when they were still sold as singles on, say, Cool Stuff Inc.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So it's back. We had a really exciting December 2019 with a countdown to Christmas with a set a day. That must have been a huge undertaking.
Yeah. Grid kits everywhere. For people who don't know, all of that stuff that you see in WordPress when you go in the essentials list, the image-based version, that's in the background. Every single set is a separate grid kit that I had to build from the ground up for it to look like that. So it was a lot of work. It is worth it in the end. It looks great.
It does.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt, aka Jordo, for helping us figure out a way to make it look good, and also for including different options, because the big image-based version is the one that took the most work, but we also have a PDF that you can use so that if you just want to use it as, say, a checklist, you can use that text-based list, and it's very easy with the PDF version. And there's also a searchable text-based list too that's available through the Essentials list. So there are 3 different versions made so that no matter what is your style, whether you want something that's searchable, something that's visual where you actually see the cards right away, or whether you want just something to use as a document to keep on your desktop for reference, we have you covered.
Wow, I didn't know you guys had all that. That's really good.
I would say probably the shortest one that you had to work on there is probably my favorite on the essentials list there, Laurier, is the Defenders team pack. I'm going to quote directly from the page here because it's one of my favorite things on the dm-north.com website. It says, this is where we would list the essentials from the Marvel Dice Masters, the Defenders team pack, if there were any. There aren't. Sorry. There really
you mean
weren't
you don't
any
have
good
one?
cards in that set.
It's your favorite set, Jocelyn. You don't have one that's that good? Oh.
I have the set. I have all of it. But there really aren't any meta, semi-competitive cards at all in that set. I remember it being very high cost, hard to get to. There wasn't anything valuable in there.
I don't have it. The only card I ever used from it was Eye of Agamotto, the global.
That's Doctor Strange.
Oh, that's Doctor Strange. Well, there you go.
Yeah, literally the only 2 cards that were even remotely close to making the list from that were the Jessica Jones that's buffed from global abilities, but then I was like, why would I want to use a 5 cost for that, even though it's a nice buff, when there's other things that can be buffed much more effectively with globals. Keep in mind, around that time we got Fix It. Not quite then, but just 6 months later we got Fix It, and at the time Jessica Jones came out, that ability would not have been enough to win anyway. And then the other one was the Hellcat that prevents you from your opponent from buying a certain die the turn after she's fielded. But by that point, your opponent probably already bought what he wanted, and oh no, I have to wait another turn. Like, it just both of those were like neat, but not enough, and it's unfortunate.
Well, and not long after that, or maybe before, because I'm not good on the timing, but didn't we get Spider-Man Maximum Carnage with Shriek?
2 months after Defenders, yes.
Yeah, and that would be a much more effective control card than Hellcat, right?
And even before then, we had other cards that were much more effective. Because, let's see. Shriek came out 2 months after, a month and a half, I think, after the initial rotation. Because 2017 is when, I think it's when Modern was first introduced. And it's around the time that Batman came out. Yes, now I remember. Defenders came out right before Batman. Batman had a fair amount of power creep compared to previous stuff in terms of stats. Defenders, why would I want a 5-cost Jessica Jones when I can get a 5-cost rare Batman? The power level of the Defenders team pack was not worth those big 5+ purchase costs.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So you put a lot of thought into building the essentials list. You looked at what people were playing, how they're playing it, and how effective the cards are. To your point right now, like you just said, why pay 5 for Jessica Jones when I can pay 6 for a Fix It, which is a win condition in its own right? And then you update it, right? As new sets come out, something might become less relevant or more relevant, and things get changed.
Yes, to a degree. I try not to remove win conditions and strategies just because I like for people to still use those strategies. For example, Black Manta Retaliation is not going to be the top thing you want to play anymore in Golden Age. But it's in a semi-competitive context where it's still one of the really good strategies to try. And if you're trying out Justice League, it's a must try at least. What I will tend to remove from the list more often are the support pieces that become outclassed. For example, Malekith, the Super Rare Malekith, is no longer relevant now that it's out of Modern, seeing as in Golden Age we have Blue Eyes White Dragon. There is no good strategic reason, in my opinion, to use Malekith over Blue Eyes. So, Malekith goes off the list.
Unless you don't have a Blue Eyes.
Well, then it's no longer essential, but it's a card. Malekith would no longer be essential. That doesn't mean, just because it's not on the essentials list, doesn't mean it can't be worth using for you.
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind, I'm not sure, the target clientele for the list, the first target clientele, was always people who wouldn't have the cards and would want to know which ones to go after.
Right.
I'm not going to tell them to hunt down a super rare if a rare from another set would do the same job.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So now as we get new sets, you're going to continue to update the list.
That's the idea.
And forgive me for not knowing the answer to this, Laurier, but did you update WWE yet?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
And when I did put in WWE, I also took that opportunity to add and remove a few cards. In fact, if you go on the Dice Masters Essential List page, there's an update on March 27th where I've actually started putting a log of what I would add and what I would remove from that point on.
That's a good idea.
I like that.
So you're going to start seeing those logs. Like that was the first change that was logged there, but you'll see, oh, I added these cards. Like I'll mention, okay, I added WWE.
Yeah.
Then I added these cards from other sets. I removed these cards. And I've added extra comments to a few cards that were affected because they were banned from Golden Age.
Right.
But, yeah, so you have the list, you have the information there. But yes, I did add WWE, and obviously because we don't know all of the contents of the draft pack sets, and we don't even know the order in which everything will come out, I'm not going to touch the list, and in terms of new sets anyway, until we get that information. I do still have a minor update planned to the list just to add and remove a couple of cards, but that's still pending because I want to have a bit more time to consider a couple of cards.
And although you sort of champion this list and it's your baby, it's not like you do it on your own, right? So Laurier does provide his list to us at DM North to review, and I think you talk to a few other people sometimes too, right?
Yeah, I approach a couple of other people. The last big update that I did, Nick, Wally, and I had a lot of interesting discussions there too. And sometimes just members from the community will let their thoughts known, sometimes repeatedly so, in one particular case that I can think of.
Does this have anything to do with Polaris?
Sage, actually, but yes.
Okay.
No, Polaris, I didn't need much.
Gamora.
Oh, don't get me started on that.
So that was Ben Scott.
Yes.
Who is very vocal about the fact that he doesn't think Gamora belongs on the list.
Well, it's more that he was vocal about the fact that he wanted Sage on the list. Which, after rotation, okay, fine. I thought we'd see Yawning Portal everywhere, so I was hesitant to add it because fielding cost wasn't as relevant prior to rotation, and afterwards I thought, if everyone's running Yawning Portal, Sage is just not going to have a place. But in the flow of things in the current meta, people aren't running Yawning Portal that much, so Sage does have a place. So I agreed that, okay, yeah, sure, in a semi-competitive context, based on how the meta is evolving, yes, fine, Sage can be on the list.
So Laurier provides us the list at DM North, and the 6 of us now, if I'm counting right, the 5 of us plus Laurier get a chance to review and add our comments. I would like to say that I feel that I was very pivotal in getting Noxious Blightbringer, Tosin of Misery on this list. I think that I made a good argument for it, and you finally agreed. So I'm happy about that, although I do think it's a little bit less relevant now that we don't have Rare Collector.
You don't need to worry about just Collector. Keep in mind, we are about to get the Blue Eyes Global back in the form of Phoenix.
Spoiler alert.
So, yes, spoiler for people who haven't been following the spoilers that have been shown at least twice that I can think of. But yes, so Noxious Blightbringer is going to continue to be a good damage option if you can put things on energy faces, and we'll talk about that later when we get into the meta and where the meta's going. So he is a good option in a semi-competitive play. There's lots of good stuff you can do with him.
I think that he's interesting for sure.
Especially funny when used with Batman always prepared. And Rare absorbing that.
Anything that duplicates the when fielded.
Correct.
Yeah.
For sure. Absorbing Man. I love my when fielded absorbing man.
What does the Batman do?
The one that rerolls?
The Batman, yeah. Essentially, he's a flip card. On one side, when he's fielded, you reroll all of your opponent's villains, and on the other side, he rerolls all your opponent's non-villains. So, depending on your context, you might be able to reroll all your opponent's stuff, and because the card doesn't specify where they go to the reserve pool.
Yeah.
So, say I field Batman with Absorbing Man active. I reroll whatever I chose, whether it be non-villains or villains, twice. So they have a 75% chance to be on an energy phase. And then I field the Blightbringer.
Yeah.
Which triggers twice.
And then the hurt happens.
Exactly.
That's a pretty cool way to look at it.
That's the Blightbringer that deals damage for them with energy in their reserve pool?
Yeah.
Yes, equal to the amount of energy in their reserve pool. Count energy symbols, not faces that show energy.
It was on my Worlds team with my collector. I had that on there because I do find that, especially when you're playing at a higher competitive level, people tend to save more energy for globals. So it was a good include on my Worlds team there, and it did come in handy there on a couple of games, although I didn't end up showing well. I had some bad matchups, but there was a couple of points where people started buying more stuff than they normally would just so they wouldn't have energy, so that I couldn't hurt them with it. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, so much of last World's tournament was matchups.
Yeah.
It was crazy with how many different kinds of teams you had in there. I mean, seriously, anyone in the top 8 could have been the world champion.
Definitely.
It was crazy.
Including you. We would be hesitant, or we'd be, what's the word I'm looking for here? It would be poor of us not to mention that you were the runner-up.
Yeah, which I had lots of great matches in there, sandwiched in between 2 matches against Ben. The first match of the day and the grand final.
The beginning and the end.
Yes.
Well, it happens, right?
Well, yeah, he had a perfect team to counter my style, which was more of an aggro style, because he had a lot of energy, and he was essentially trying to control me back with static field, and I didn't have the space for global hate.
Yeah.
Life happens.
And, I would also say that his playstyle, Ben's playstyle, I mean, I'd seen him testing that Green Lantern team for quite some time, and that was one of the reasons I included the Blightbringer on my own team, in case I got matched up against him, because I thought it would do him a world of hurt, but we didn't get matched, so. But, another time.
Yes.
So anything else on the essentials list, Laurier, that you want to add?
Well, if anyone wants to check it out after hearing us talk about it for the last little while, you can go on dm-north.com. If you go on the menu from the website, you look under features, the Dice Masters Essentials list is right there. And from the main page of that, you have the list of sets. You can check it. If you go there, you will see the images from that set of the cards that I would recommend that are part of the list. Alternatively, if you scroll up and look under the update that dated December 31st, you can find a searchable text-based list there, which I've alluded to. And if you scroll down, further down to the nearer to the bottom of the page, there's also the PDF version there. So any of the 3 options, it's all the same content. We updated at the same time. And if you want the essentials list, you can find it in any of those 3 methods.
Fantastic. And if you have any qualms with the list, you can reach Laurier on Discord at ccm00007. So let's turn it over to the meta and talk a little bit about the meta. So as Kim said at the beginning of this episode, we had a rotation start on May 1st, and it was a pretty deep cut. I think deeper more than we expected because of the fact that we have, COVID-19 and coronavirus, and some of the new product that was expected hasn't come out yet and probably won't come for a while. So rotation cut, as many of you know, to Avengers Infinity and the Harley Quinn team pack, which were the oldest stuff on the list. So everything right now is a non-collectible product, LCG, LCG, living card game. And the next set is going to be collectible. The next few sets are going to be collectible, but they haven't come out yet. So as we do when that changes, like a lot of win cons are gone. We just talked about the collector going away. There's a lot of pieces that were important to win conditions that are no longer available, so those win conditions are less relevant. What do you think the meta is right now, and where do you think it's going?
Okay, first of all, you missed a great pun opportunity there. This is such a deep cut, you could even say it's water deep.
See, I leave the puns to you, Laurier.
Oh, thank you. Okay. But honestly, if you look at the meta right now, a lot of control was cut drastically in one go. A lot of control. So right now the meta is kind of patchy. There's a lot of aggressive strategies that can just, with minimal disruptions, can just blast their way through. So if you have, say, a Becky Lynch team, and you have a way of stopping your opponent from using globals and neutralizing with just a bit of removal their, say, big E or whatever other tools they use, your opponent's going to be in deep doo-doo. But now, if you look at the sets that are coming up, particularly Avengers Infinity, which I think is supposed to be the next one.
Infinity Gauntlet.
Avengers Infinity Gauntlet, yes. It's going to be... There's going to be a lot added there, which we honestly will need to have a more balanced meta. For example, we have some crazy removal being added that will do a big impact. Because right now, what's the main removal tool that people are using? Mimic. Because it's the only really good one.
Well, what about like Intimidate with Gazer?
Intimidate stops for a turn. It's great against Godcatcher, but against Becky Lynch, you're just getting Becky Lynch out of play during your own turn, then it's back on theirs.
Fair enough, yeah.
So the only really good tool if you're going to go against aggro builds, which are the bulk of the meta right now, not exclusively, there's other control builds we're going to go into as well, but you need good removal, and right now the meta is lacking that in terms of the quality of the removal, with again Mimic being the big thing that people like to use for targeted removal right now.
And when you say Mimic, you mean Mimic flying, blasting, slashing?
Yes,
I was just
true. I should specify.
Yeah, I think that's been
Mimic.
Every single meta team.
Yes, if Spider-Man was War of the Heart, Mimic is Wall of the Text.
Yes.
It's true. There's a lot of text on that card.
So that's the one that when you field it, you target an opposing character die, and both are rolled, right?
And then from there, whatever happens, your opponent's die is going to get KO'd no matter what. You just happen to have a 25% chance that your Mimic's going to become the character you just KO'd.
Right.
So
if they both roll character faces, then your Mimic becomes that character.
And otherwise, your Mimic is KO'd and you get to do it again the next turn.
Right.
Which is a very good consolation prize.
It is a pretty good removal piece. It's a 4-cost mask, right?
Yes.
So it is a little bit more expensive than some of the control pieces we've seen in the past.
Yeah, but it's quite easy to get the 4-cost masks these days. Mm-hmm. There's this card, you might have heard of it. It's called Asuka. And that I'm talking for clarity about Asuka, the Empress of Tomorrow. She's a 3-cost mask that discounts mask characters by 2. And that gets out of control in a hurry.
I could see that because there's a lot of very strong mask characters.
There's a fair bit, and honestly, that Asuka is going to become a problem in the meta going forward. I can just predict it right now. She's already good in some limited builds. People are currently just using her typically more with Green Lantern Human, which is a Justice League character that allows Justice League characters to deal damage, essentially like the old school Lantern Ring, based on the amount of energy you've got saved up whenever the Justice League characters attack. You put Asuka, you buy a bunch of cheap Justice League characters, and you swing in and you deal a metric ton of damage.
So in Modern, though, are there a lot of cheap Justice League characters?
Not a lot, but if you have an Asuka on the board to make them cheaper, Zatanna costs 1.
That's true. Fair enough.
And she's not the only good option that you can use. Obviously, Green Lantern himself is a mask, so he costs 3.
Mm-hmm.
And other than that, you could use Plastic Man, who's also a 3-cost mask. So
we lost our 2-cost ones, though, right?
Yes.
Those rotated out with the Batman set.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So until Kryptonite Crisis, I don't think we'll get any more Justice League, obviously, unless they sneak one into Dark Phoenix Saga, which would be funny.
That would be funny, but I don't think it's likely. So yeah, so control, like what other control pieces are there really at this point?
Well, it depends what you're trying to control against. Right now, people are really dead set on stopping aggro, so one of the big control pieces that's used a lot is Big E, Powerlifter's Physique.
Yeah.
Because what he does is essentially any source that would deal more than 2 damage to you, like say an overcrushing 8/8 Becky Lynch, well, instead of dealing you, say, 10 overcrush damage, you take 2 damage.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite worth it. Alternatively, there's also several options for 3-cost characters that will either not take damage from a Becky Lynch or a Godcatcher, or they're gonna... Actually, no, typically they'll be there to just not take damage and or KO the opposing characters at the same time. So the best example of that is Poison Ivy Red from the Harley Quinn team pack. So when she blocks or is blocked by a non-villain, she gains Deadly, and you can prevent all damage dealt to her by non-villain character dice.
And of course, Becky Lynch is not a villain character, so that's handy.
Yeah.
And neither is the Godcatcher.
Yeah, so for now, again, the big control pieces that you see used are things like Poison Ivy, are things like Big E. Wallop, the basic action, is very handy in that regard as well, where there's a global where you can pay Fist and make it so that a blocked character die deals no damage.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're dealing with the characters that have Overcrush, great way to stop them there.
So it seems like we have some control for that aggro style that people are gravitating to, especially with the launch of WWE, and our Becky Lynch seems to be the pinnacle right now, but the Godcatcher is still in that sphere. But there's also direct damage, and I think we lost a big control piece in that with the rotation when we lost Bishop.
That's true. When I was mentioning there are gaps right now, I'm seriously concerned by the fact that we don't have any blankers. Mm-hmm. We don't have much in the way of preventing fielding at all. Except for the 4-cost blob that stops only 2 costs. We don't have much to stop things like, best example I can think of, we don't have the Bishop that stops direct damage that you mentioned. We don't have ways to stop when fielded effects like we did with the old Madam Mask. But we're getting some of that back in the next set.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of spoilers out of Infinity Gauntlet. They started rolling out in Memphis, right? And
Yes.
We were able to do the preview draft where we saw some pretty cool stuff in there. And I think there's some control pieces coming there, as well as some really cool new mechanics.
Yes, and when Infinity Gauntlet comes out, it'll help balance out the meta a fair bit, because we're going to have some additional ways to stop these Becky Lynches. Okay, you didn't get to deal me 16 damage this turn. Your Becky Lynch is still around. Okay, I'm going to spend it to energy by using Pick the Troll.
Mm-hmm. Or Rare Spider-Man.
Yes. So there are tools there to help us out and to make for games that you're not just going to be a sitting duck when you know that your opponent's going to swing at you and kill you.
Right. So things are kind of cutthroat and unbalanced right now, especially when you look at, I guess when you look at both aggro and when you look at direct damage strategies, because there's no control really against direct damage, short of mimicking somebody out and hoping it doesn't roll back next turn.
Or using Hope Rachel to KO everything before your opponent gets to attack with their direct damage.
Yeah, that's fun. It's a fun control strategy. I've been playing around with that. So, of course, using Hope Summers' pluripotent echopraxia to copy Rachel Summers' Prestige, which, when another X-Men character dies, KO all other character dice except the Rachel Summers die, dealing this effect. I just haven't quite figured out how to make it a win condition yet. I was trying to do it by actually buying Rachel, but at a 7 cost, it's a little bit steep and challenging.
Yeah, that strategy doesn't have much in the way of win cons. I've seen people use the 2-cost Jubilee, which I think is interesting, where it allows you, when you field a bold character, to deal damage to your opponent, and then they load up on other cheap bold characters, say the Grell that has a when KO'd effect that allows you to prep dice. There's fun things you can do, but I think the real tool that's going to help Hope Rachel become more viable as a strategy is when the Dark Phoenix Saga set comes out. Now, I'm going to discuss a spoiler that you should know. If you don't already, I do apologize. Spoiler alert.
We need something for that.
There's a super rare, the super rare Jubilee. And now, really old school players will recognize this as being the effect of Human Torch, Johnny Storm. I don't remember the exact way the text is worded, but essentially, while she's active, whenever you field a character, you deal 1 damage to your opponent and 1 damage to a character.
Yeah, I remember that card.
That gets out of control real fast, especially if what happens is you field Hope, copying Rachel, you field Jubilee, you field a bunch of other characters, slide kicks, whatever else. You KO all that stuff on your opponent's turn with Nihilor, or when that set comes out, the Dark Phoenix Global. On their turn before they attack, they have nothing on the board. You're going to attack into nothing. On your turn, you field all your stuff, you damage your opponent for each of the characters you fielded, and then you get the stats that just get to attack into nothing.
Yeah.
And so you can just win that way. So
unless you're Kim and you're playing Orbital Strike with that Thunderbird.
I must say it did annoy Ben when I played him.
What does that Thunderbird do again, Kim? Can you tell the listeners?
When a non-Thunderbird character is KO'd.
When Thunderbird is KO'd?
When he's KO'd, you return all your non-Thunderbird characters back to the field at level 1.
And that includes your opponent's characters?
Yes.
Yeah, so that is a nice effective control piece against Hope Rachel, but it really doesn't do much for pretty well any other strategy except Kim's Orbital Strike team, which she is definitely going to make work one of these days.
Except, when you have Nylar on your team and your opponent has Nylar on your team, it doesn't work. The Thunderbird, then it doesn't come back. But Thunderbird was really annoying playing against Rachel team. They got pretty annoyed with that. So
yeah. And keep in mind, Thunderbird will not be as effective when Dark Phoenix Saga comes out, because the Dark Phoenix Global is not a once per turn.
And that's the KO Global?
Yes. It's the Blue Eyes Global that's coming back.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because Nylar is once per turn, right? So they can do it on your turn.
Yeah.
But the Blue Eyes Global is KO a character die you control, and then you can purchase something?
Yes, but the way it was ruled previously for Blue Eyes, you don't need to actually be able to buy something. It's just that they're so you can use it on your opponent's turn to just KO a character.
So presuming that ruling carries forward with the wording, which would make sense. If the wording's consistent, then you would be able to KO something without making a purchase, so you could do it as many times as you wanted.
Exactly.
And it's interesting they're bringing that back, because they had just brought out, the Rock, that has the similar global, but instead of KO, it's Sacrifice.
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't mildly amused by this.
So I thought that the Sacrifice mechanic would be a little bit more balanced, right, as opposed to KOing.
Sacrifice makes it too costly, though. because they make you pay 2, if I recall. Or is it 1?
No, it's 1.
Oh, it's 1, but it's 1 generic. Okay, that's why I thought it said 2. Yeah, it's 1 and sacrifice, so you essentially get rid of 2 dice to reduce the purchase cost by 2. And there is almost no effect that triggers off of sending your own die to use.
Mm-hmm.
So it just doesn't do enough. I mean, the character himself is hilariously good because your opponent has to block. There's a lot of good stuff to be said about it. But the global itself is not worth it.
Especially with the Blue Eyes White Dragon global coming back in the form of the Dark Phoenix, right?
Yeah. So I'm still debating whether or not that should affect the Rock, which is currently in the list.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I guess the other thing to consider is that the spoiler we've seen for Dark Phoenix, that set, is it final? We don't know, right?
It's never final until we have it in our hands, but it's generally pretty consistent from the moment we see a card.
So there's a slim chance that they may reword it.
I would be shocked because we've seen that spoiler at least twice.
I understand, but I'm just saying, until we physically have it in our hand.
Hey, even then, I have a card from the prototypes that we got at Worlds, and I saw it in the spoiler video that WizKids did, where they opened Infinity Gauntlet, and they changed the art on one of the cards.
Yeah.
And I have that card physically, so I can prove it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we knew those were prototypes, right? So
yeah.
At Worlds, we were drafting prototype cards, so we knew that things were going to change with them. So, and I think Jimmy did say that, Jimmy O'Brien of WizKids did say the art may not be final in some of them. I think that we were all hoping the spot might get an update, so it wasn't an exact reprint of the art from the previous set, but it doesn't look like that happened.
I mean, it's not the first time that would happen. See Dwarf Wizards and Guardian of Faith, or
Heist,
or Ant-Man and Confront the Mighty.
I like the art on that though. I like that Ant-Man and Confront the Mighty. Confront the Mighty is another control piece that's out there.
Yes, it's good, but you're giving it to your opponent, so you have to be careful when you include it.
Well, it's a 2 cost, so just get a Yawning Portal and buy them all yourself for 1.
Yeah, and then you have 4 non-continuous actions floating around your bag, which is now a mess.
Oh, there's ways around that.
There's ways around everything, but by the time you have your ways out there, your opponent's probably going to win.
Probably. That's a lot of actions to buy.
Well, it's like buying Thrown Brick.
Thrown Brick recycles itself. That's the thing, it
true.
preps itself. That's what makes it so good and makes it a great bag management tool.
Yeah, as long as it rolls, right, then you have the ability to hit something, not KO it, and prep it for the next turn. So that keeps it out of your bag.
Yeah.
And then allows you to prep an additional die, so.
And for 2
Exactly.
costs, it's great.
Oh my goodness.
With Throne Bricks, it's almost it's not on your team and it's on your opponent's team. It's probably there for a reason, right? So you almost wonder sometimes, is it worth it to try and buy them out from under your opponent?
Yeah.
Well, and that goes back to something. Whenever you're playing a match against an opponent, always identify if you're the aggro. Always, always, always. If you see that they have a plan where they're going to use those Thrown Bricks on turn 4 or 5, and you're not going to have one by then, and they're going to kick your behind with those Thrown Bricks, then yeah, maybe try and buy 1 or 2 out from under them.
Mm-hmm.
But if you see that, okay, I can win before those Thrown Bricks even become a factor, maybe don't. Like, it's...
Like if you're running a Becky Lynch team?
For example, or Godcatcher.
Yeah.
Heck, even Lita sidekicks.
Yeah, that's pretty effective, Lita sidekick, I have to say. I borrowed your team from the 2-team takedown tournament to test it out, and it's pretty nasty, those sidekicks.
Yeah. That Plague Marine is such a great way to recycle them too.
Definitely. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I still haven't played a Godcatcher team. Like myself, I haven't put a team together.
Oh, you gotta play it. You gotta try
I
it
know,
out.
I know.
Yeah. Oh, I need to ask Matt to upload the content from my first match from that 2-team takedown. Because I ended up, I kid you not, on one of the games with 8 Godcatcher tokens on the board.
That's a lot of tokens.
That's a lot of tokens, yeah.
Yes.
I would be like,
But
yeah, you win.
My opponent had 4 Poison Ivies.
Oh.
Oh dear.
So, yeah.
That's
It was-
something.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to seeing that match.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dear Matt, please
Oh,
get the
Matt.
match on YouTube.
Yeah.
Sincerely, Jocelyn, Kim, and Laurier.
His ears must be burning him.
I actually lost that match in the end. It was a really good match overall to do though.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, Godcatcher gets out of control in a hurry if you have the right build.
Yeah, if you can trigger it quickly, for sure. And it does seem very aggravating. I think Iceman is still a threat.
I have not yet seen an Iceman build that I can genuinely say I would be scared of in the current modern meta. Because if you want to trigger Iceman regularly, you almost need Wand.
Mm-hmm.
And Wand costs you 1 life for 2 that you deal your opponent.
But if you have more life than your opponent at the end of the game, then you still win, right?
Yes, but then you give your opponent a good chunk of the life that they would need on their end. So the question ends up being, can you deal 20 damage to your opponent before they deal you 10?
Yeah, I think it depends on the matchup too, right? What you're playing against. It may not be as effective perhaps against a Becky Lynch team, which can go very quickly, especially with that 4 cost. Easy to get to the 4 cost, overcrushing, get it on level 3, add that, the Jerry Lawler global that doubles the overcrush damage.
Exactly.
So you might not be able to get it out there as fast as that. But if you have a way to deal with Becky, perhaps, then maybe it is doable. I haven't tested it against a Becky team, so I don't know. But I have been playing around with an Iceman build that is fairly effective. But yes, it does include Wand.
Yeah, but yeah, so Iceman currently is also be sure to test against Hope Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
Because Hope Rachel is another thing that can really hurt Iceman, because you just KO Iceman before he gets to attack, and thus before he gets to deal his damage.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, seeing as we don't have any major competitive events on the horizon, official events anyway, with the coronavirus, we're waiting to hear what's going to happen next. Mostly I'm just, playing around with a few things to see what they are, and I always like to see after rotation, is something as effective as Iceman still as effective? Can it still be as effective? What else can we do with it?
Unless Black Widow, slows you down there.
Yeah, the Black Widow agent does slow it down.
and I think that card is underestimated right now.
I know. I don't see it a lot on everybody's team, and I put it on all my teams.
I don't know if I'd put it on all my teams.
I always do.
But the fact that she is very much a dark horse that slows down burn. Maybe she's not as relevant today, but over time as the meta evolves, don't forget about that card.
Well, I think there's a lot of things that she still completely neuters, right? And we're not seeing a lot of her right now because it's been very aggro focused. But if you think about range, right? If you have Venerable Dreadnought giving all your characters range 1 and you've got a Black Widow agent in the field, then all of a sudden range just disappears, right?
Correct.
So and a lot of things that do 1 damage only just become nothing. So you think about, you field a bolt character die with that 2-cost Jubilee and it does 1 damage to your opponent. Not anymore. So there are some direct damage strategies out there still, and I think that Black Widow would definitely help against those.
I agree. But yeah, so she's not as important now, but she will be important to keep in the back of your mind as that meta evolves.
Definitely. Fantastic. So Laurier, do you have any questions for myself or Kim?
Oh, honestly, the main thing I would ask you guys, so I know at least one of you, if not both, is participating, because currently we are we're recording this before the one big weekend event that's happening this coming weekend.
Right.
In fact, I believe it's the 16th?
Yes, this Saturday. We're recording right now. It's a Tuesday.
Yes. So, hey, it's kind of funny. We're recording this on the birthday of one of my children. My youngest is turning 3. And on the 16th, the day of that tournament, one of my kids is turning 6. Is turning 7, sorry. Goodness. Hard to keep track.
Well, when there's 4. When there's 4 children, as you have.
Fair. But anyway, so needless to say, I won't be participating, but I'd love to hear you guys before you have to play them live. I'd like to hear what you guys are running for that tournament.
Well, I'm actually not playing in the tournament. I have, between my dad's birthday is Friday and my nephew's first birthday is Monday. So this weekend, although it's social distancing, it's still birthdays. So I'm going to try and get out and do some porch visits. So I'm not going to be able to make it to the tournament. But Kim is playing, although I'm not sure she's settled on her team yet.
I've been practicing 2 teams. Jocelyn's been nice to help me test some of the teams. I think we narrowed it to 1. Spoiler alert, non-spoiler alert, but when this episode drops, it won't be a spoiler alert. I've taken Matt's team. The team Laurier that he used Citizen V with and Mystique. I've made it current modern, which is modern now. And using that as my team.
Like an overcrushing team.
Yeah. It's an
overcrushing. Oh, I see what you're doing there.
So with Mystique, that gives +1/+1. Citizen V, if I get them to flip, gives them villains overcrush and +1. Getting him to flip's the problem in this modern because there's nothing to flip the card, but we have a couple cards that we're gonna test a little bit more on. With the Viper, Black Viper. I don't have it on my team, but we're going to test that. And then the only thing I really have to worry about is the Kate Bishop, the static field, to push back.
Yeah. So we're looking at some options. Yeah. Because there is some options which we didn't talk about earlier, but there are some options there's still some global hate out there.
Oh, there's some fantastic global hate. There's even some 2-cost global hate now, which is insanely useful. Between Eddie Guerrero and Istrid Horn.
Yep.
If you're just trying to stop static field, I'd actually suggest Eddie Guerrero. He's really handy.
Yeah, I was thinking that, but then he's a 1 attack, so...
Well,
it would work. And then the only other problem I have to face is if I face a Rachel Hope team.
Do you have Mimic on the team?
I had Mimic, but I replaced him with... we're trying him with the Black Viper.
If you have Asuka on the team, put Mimic in. Trust me.
We can't.
Find a way.
Asuka's banned.
Oh, Asuka's banned?
Yeah. Both Beckys are banned.
Okay, I haven't been keeping that track of the tournament because I knew I couldn't make it when I saw the date.
Two of the
there's
Beckys
5
are banned.
cards that are banned.
2 of the Beckys, Asuka, Yawning Portal, Godcatcher. One of the Godcatchers.
Yes.
The Godcatcher is a 3-cost Godcatcher.
So we can't use that.
So Kim's found a way to make a nasty overcrushing team without Godcatchers and Becky's.
Yeah, but still, you need some way of doing removal. Or you could use Istrid Horn instead of Eddie Guerrero and name the Nihilor Global when you field her.
Yeah. So that's what I figure I'll lean more towards. Just because Eddie's a 1 attack. And it's like, but when it attacks, but then if I have a Rachel Summers team, then I'm in trouble because I have pass priority, and then they're going to KO my team. They're going to KO my guys. So I think.
Are you locked in on your basic actions?
The basic actions I'm using is Ray Shield, just in case I can't flip Citizen V to give my characters Overcrush. So I have raised shields to buy to give him Overcrush. And then Jerry Laurier to double the damage.
May I make a suggestion?
Mm-hmm.
If you want to avoid using raised shields, you could use Confront the Mighty as a removal tool.
I have to look up Confront the Mighty because I can never remember what that one is.
It's essentially, and I know you're probably, I'd bet dollars for doing this, you probably have Widow on your team, so.
Of course I do.
Yeah, so Confront the Mighty is a shoo-in, because you choose one of your characters, you choose one of your opponent's characters, and the character you chose among yours gains attack equal to your opposing character's defense, and then the two characters hit each other. So you're guaranteed to KO your opponent's characters, your opponent's character that you've targeted. Except that because you have Widow on your side, if they use Confront the Mighty, the damage their character is going to deal, which is considered ability damage, is going to be reduced by 1. So whatever you're using that they're going to try to KO is going to survive.
Oh, I never thought of it that way.
As long as your Black Widow is active, right?
Yeah.
Yes, so again, seeing as you have Widow on that team, put Confront the Mighty in there.
Yeah, especially with the Black Viper, Kim, you're going to be able to trigger your flip on Citizen V, because you just need him to infiltrate once so you can flip him. So with Black Viper, you can, when he's fielded, you can choose a character that can't be blocked with infiltrate. So there's your Citizen V, you get your infiltrate trigger, you flip him, and then you're in business. I think it'll be fun. It looks like a fun team to run.
Yeah, I would suggest, even if you know you're not going to be able to get your Overcrush, constantly attack with that Mystique when you have her on the board. Just because you'll always be keeping up the pressure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even if you don't have Overcrush, just do it.
Yeah, hopefully my opponent has a field that I could be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10. 10.
To Laurier's point earlier, in this match, you're basically going to be the aggressor, Kim, right? You have to go aggro with this team. It's not a sit back and wait for it.
Yeah. Once I get her out there and I know she's a beefy, just keep attacking. Because most likely they're not going to take the damage.
It will be interesting to see what comes out of this, because with both of the main Becky Lynch's band and the Godcatcher band and Asuka band for making masked characters cheaper, it'll be interesting to see what win conditions and support pieces rise to the top. I know Yawning Portal's band too. You're a big fan of Yawning Portal, Laurier.
Yeah.
I'm not sold on it.
Oh, you should actually try playing with it.
I have. Mine doesn't roll, so it doesn't work.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, no, it's I like the one that preps, so not comfortable in the other one.
Yeah, but the big entrance on steroids, come on. I managed to buy easily 4 5-cost Batman dice for 1 each and put them all in my bag, and then field characters to roll them right away with because I have Atlantis active at the same time.
Yeah, I think on the right build it makes sense. You need to be able to cycle it. You need to be able to do that well. So I think it's, I think on your team, for example, with your Batman and your Lita, your sidekicks and Atlantis, I think it's easy, right? But in other cases, you might need other ways to cycle it. And, if it rolls,
yeah,
it will
but
help.
Supreme Intelligence, just...
Yeah, Supreme Intelligence.
Anytime you have Supreme Intelligence on a team.
Yeah, that global is great. It's expensive, but valuable. So, good stuff. Well, good luck to Kim in the One Big Weekend Corona Consolation Tournament this weekend.
Well, thanks.
That's twice you said Corona. Monetization alert. Oh, that's right. We don't get monetized yet. Because we're all just doing this for fun.
We're just doing this for fun and letting the money flow out of our pockets to do so. So, but no, we're happy to do it, and it will be. I'm sure it's going to be a great tournament. I think Arj and Lucan over at RollandThunder.xyz, no apostrophe, no G, will be looking to see some pretty exciting stuff, and hopefully, once things get back to normal-ish, we'll be able to hold those in-person events that were postponed as a result of the current pandemic. So,
I am very much looking forward to that. I need to do something outside of the house.
Mm-hmm.
Me too.
My going out for local has always been my away from my son. So it's like, now it's like almost 24/7 with him. It's like, can't go anywhere.
You love being a mom,
I
but
do.
you like to have your own time.
I do.
Absolutely. You got to have that balance, right?
Yes. Which is actually what got me into Dice Masters in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's when I was on parental leave after our third child was born, and I was just going nuts from being inside the house all the time. One point I ran into this game out of sheer luck, and that weekly event started to be my escape from parenting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we all need a break, right?
Yes.
And it's why I'm an aunt and not a mom. So, I get to be the fun person,
And
take
give
them away,
back.
give the parents a break, and then give them back when I'm done. So, looking forward to spending more time like that once things get back to normal. Thanks, Laurier, for coming on the podcast today. We really appreciate it. We hope our listeners enjoyed it too. So please let us know what you think of today's podcast and the essentials list, and what you think of the current meta as far as control and win cons go. What do you think is happening now and what's going to change in the future? You can reach us in a myriad of different ways. You can start with sending us an email at tripledpodcast@dm-north.com. Of course, you can leave us a comment on the website at dm-north.com. You can also find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and also at twitch.tv, all under Dice Masters North. So until next time, on a double and dice.